the tier list of the Third Crusade leaders history. So each one, guys, make sure to leave a like down on the video below. When we get to 20 likes, we'll be doing a giveaway. We have the Abbasids Al-Nasir il-Din Allah. Let's make sure that we're doing our research, because I do not know the Abbasid leader well. Was he at the Battle of Hattin? Well, his wiki page isn't that long, so he couldn't have been that good, right? My knowledge of the Abbasids during the time of the Third Crusade is that they're in general decline. This is leading up to the Mongol sacking of Baghdad, which they burned the city down. It was never rebuilt to the same extent. I'm going to put this guy in D tier. I've never heard of him. And that may be incorrect. That's just my opinion. He really wasn't impactful in the Third Crusade. None of the books I've read on the Third Crusade really even ever mention this guy. Of course, he's a faction in our game, Lionhearts. Faction, the Abbasids, but... Next, we have Bohemond of Antioch. Let's see. Close ally of the Byzantine Empire. Bohemond was installed as prince after his mother was dethroned. He assisted the siege of Crac de Chevalier. Of course, being allied to the Byzantines kind of put him at odds with the Crusaders a little bit. Bohemond, somebody that did have impact in the Third Crusade, however, relatively minor. He is going to be C tier. Bohemond, not incredibly impactful. Again, the Antioch was also sort of in decline, especially at this time. Not quite up to its former glory, especially after the establishment of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. For Jerusalem, we have... Why is there two Jerusalem people on here? Weird. Conrad of Montferrat. I'm pretty sure this guy lived in Tyre. Yeah, this guy is the guy who was in Tyre. This guy was actually quite a Chad. Conrad was actually Richard's pick to be king of Jerusalem over Guy de Lusignan. And he never quite made it to that title, but he was allied with Richard. He had a famous defense of Tyre, obviously, and did quite a good job. I prefer him to Guy. I think he was much more competent. I'm going to put him in A tier. He was definitely better than a lot of alternatives. Next, Frederick Barbarossa. This is the meme guy. HRE. Very famously died in a river, drowned in a small river, just falling off his horse. But actually was quite a Chad as far as his reign and rise in the Holy Roman Empire. Need some music. Let's get some... It feels a little stale in here. There we go. There we go. That's much better. So, where were we? Frederick Barbarossa. He was a participant in the Second Crusade and the Third Crusade. His campaign was completely botched, but his son, I believe, son or nephew, picked up the army and continued it, but lost a majority of their force and wasn't a heavy impact on the Third Crusade. This is a third Crusade tier list. This guy was a very good leader, but had a pretty horrific and humiliating end. He's going to get B tier. If it was before then, he was actually probably A or S. but considering his impact on the Third Crusade was basically minimal due to his early demise, I think it's more than fair to put him in B tier. Next, Guy de Lusignan. This guy, sort of the villain in the Kingdom of Heaven movie. He was Philip's pick to be King of Jerusalem. So made him a little bit of a rival to Richard. This guy, he was kind of a liar. He promised Saladin that he would retire, and he ended up attacking Acre, which isn't very honorable, in my opinion. He also lost the Battle of Hattin, and, was unable to really do anything in the Siege of Acre. You could credit him for starting the Siege of Acre, but we all know that Richard won it. I don't really like this tier list. I'd rather, I'm going to make a new one below. Complete failure. That's F tier. I do feel like we know who Guy was, but he pretty much lost the Kingdom of Jerusalem. So he's F tier. And I definitely think Conrad would have been a much better King of Jerusalem had either of them become it. But Guy, he wasn't a complete failure, but as far as this list goes, he is. Next, we have Tancred in Sicily, who kind of resisted Richard's initial coming to Syracuse, although he did eventually concede and sign a treaty. He was imprisoning Richard's sister, that's right. Another one of these just sort of Norman kings of Sicily. Not really contributing much to the Third Crusade, although if you get Richard to concede to anything, you are okay. I mean, he really didn't do much. Didn't really participate in the Crusade. I'm going to put him in C tier. Just didn't really do much. Not Dogwater, not good. Next, we have the Byzantines, Isaac II Angelos. And he had a pretty bad reign. He had of course, he was ousted. By Alexios III, that's right. And he was also, kind of just incompetent. It says here he let the Byzantine navy shrink down to just 30 galleys. That's pretty pathetic. I don't... The Byzantine Empire's in decline. They had some good leaders along the way, for sure. This guy wasn't one of them. Was he like the worst leader ever? No, but he also didn't really help in the Crusade. He was probably more of a hindrance. And honestly, just pretty bad. I think he's a complete failure, honestly. Below Guy, even. Not a good leader. Next, we have Isaac Komnenos of Cyprus, who basically declared himself an emperor and illegitimate. He did stand up to Richard. He was overthrown. Pretty brutally, lost humiliatingly to Richard. His attempt to kind of claim the Byzantine Empire for himself as a false regent from abroad was sort of interesting. I don't think he's a complete failure, but definitely pretty mid. And it's not that much of a discredit to get destroyed by Richard, but it is not good either. Next, we have Nablus for the Hospitallers. I don't know much about Nablus's reign in the Hospitallers. However, the Hospitallers were a pretty successful part of the Third Crusade. Yeah, their participation in Arsuf was definitely notable, although I don't think the Hospitallers and Nablus were best in this era. And for that reason, he's kind of unnotable, but we'll put him in C tier. Next, we have the Assassins, Old Man of the Mountain, Rashid ad-Din Sinan. Now, there's a lot of this that's kind of from, the Assassin's Creed video games, but this guy was actually a Chad, and the Assassins were probably at their height under the Old Man of the Mountain. And I do think that he accomplished a lot given his position. Not somebody who is super well known historically, but had a huge impact on the Third Crusade. That is true. Especially famously planting a knife next to Saladin's bed, relieving that siege. Also participating in some assassinations through his men, and just being very feared. The best of all the assassin leaders ever. I do think that puts him in S tier, or at least high A. Godlike, everybody knows their name. Maybe from the Assassin's Creed games, yeah, maybe. I do think he deserves S. He's gonna be like low S, high A. Next, we have Philip II of France. I don't need to really look at the wiki. I know a lot about this guy. This guy, if you were to put the failure of the Third Crusade at the hands of one person, it would be Philip II. He was more concerned with his rivalry with Richard, sabotaging Richard from abroad. He was definitely very envious and jealous of Richard's military success, charisma. He sabotaged the Crusade. He didn't accomplish anything on his own. He was a thorn in the side of Richard. He attacked his castles. He broke his treaty with Richard. They both accepted a pact. Hey, we'll go on crusade together. We won't attack each other's lands while we're on crusade, because they were competing for land in France. Philip II retreated from the crusade and started attacking Richard's land while he was gone. Pretty despicable guy. Definitely in the Third Crusade. Was under the shadow of Richard, despite the fact that Richard was subservient to him in a way in that weird feudal system. Just kind of a pathetic character. I really don't like him. He's definitely my least favorite. He's definitely bottom of F tier. Without him interfering, I think he could have just not shown up and not sabotaged Richard, and the crusade would have been a success. So total hindrance. Next, the Red Eagle of Saladin. This one's really easy. This is just top of S tier. Saladin lost every battle he fought with Richard, but he was the reason the Crusade had to be called in the first place. He's been romanticized a lot in Western culture as far as being sort of a proponent of knightly virtue, despite being a Saracen, despite being a Muslim and not being a Christian. He's depicted very positively in the West, which is odd because you think of other ones like Baybars or Nur-ad-Din were kind of villainized. But it's worth it. I mean, he was very merciful. He was definitely charismatic, a good strategist, not the best. Definitely very organized, had some, just very brilliant diplomatically. Also just rallying and uniting the Muslim forces in the Middle East under his banner. Obviously apprenticed under Nur-ad-Din, which made him very formidable just to have that asset, that resource. Definitely easy S tier. Saladin is goated. Sure. Next, Richard. My personal favorite hero of the Third Crusade. The Crusade would have been a complete disaster without Richard. Actually, he was probably the only reason that it had any success whatsoever. Richard was in position to take Jerusalem. He could have taken Jerusalem probably pretty easily. He made a tactical decision not to take it because he knew he couldn't hold it. He didn't want to risk the men. So he struck a deal with Saladin, allowing some of his troops to visit the Holy Sepulchre. Saladin accepted, which was quite virtuous of him, in my opinion. And just overall, one of the best leaders, not only best leader in the Third Crusade, but one of the best military leaders ever. Didn't lose any battles, was a warrior at the front lines. His relationship with Saladin was really fascinating. They would write letters together, although they never met. He and Saladin were kind of in a frenemy relationship. Of course, the stain on his reputation is the 3,000 men massacred at Acre. And that's something I'd like to talk about a little bit. Saladin was essentially toying with Richard in a cat and mouse game after Richard took Acre. Richard was negotiating for some gold in order to release the 3,000 Saracen prisoners he had. Saladin kept stalling. It was Saladin's plan to keep stalling and to just stall out the crusade entirely while he could rally his troops. Meanwhile, Richard's using vital supplies, vital resources to both guard and feed and house the 3,000 soldiers. So Richard decided, I'm not going to keep playing this game. He executes all 3,000 of the prisoners in quite a barbaric move. It was calculated. This wasn't, of course, it was a horrendous thing to do, but it was a calculated move by Richard to not have to fall victim to the plans of Saladin like many Crusader leaders had before. It was kind of him seizing the initiative, and then he moved south to Arsuf, freed of the burden of the prisoners, although he never got the gold. And it's kind of amazing their relationship was recovered after this, unfortunately for the 3,000 souls. But that's the one stain on his reputation, really. It was said he would have sold London if he could have to fund the crusade. He was just a complete warrior king. He was succeeded by his brother John, who is the villain in Robin Hood because he was such a bad king. His successes were astounding. One of the best generals, tacticians of all time. I have to put him at the top of S tier. And the reason he's above Saladin is because he defeated Saladin many times in battle. And Saladin's forces were crumbling, and the morale was super low at the end of the Third Crusade. It was actually one of the reasons that they could sign their treaty and their peace. Had Richard not started the Third Crusade, the Crusaders would have been wiped out of the Levant. They wouldn't have had any stronghold. The Kingdom of Acre and the reestablished Kingdom of Jerusalem would have never been fought. Further crusades would have been impossible. He didn't conquer Jerusalem, but he basically did everything else possible. Besides that, his battle at Jaffa was so legendary. And you can just see here, casualties 2 to 700 casualties. He was vastly outnumbered. Obviously, this is probably exaggerated, but still, just incredible. Battle of Jaffa is one of the coolest events ever. It's actually, you can play through the battle in 15v15 in Lionhearts in our game. So, really incredible guy. Next, we have Robert of Sable. Robert de Sable. This guy's the villain in Assassin's Creed. I don't know much about him. Says he was successful campaigning. I think he did better and was more well-known than Nablus. And, you know, I guess he did take over Cyprus. And, you know, I think he was suitable, worthy leader. Not somebody that's super well-remembered. I just put him right below Barbarossa in B tier. Next, we have Kilij Arslan II. Being the Ayyubids are the major player from the Muslim side, not much is spoken about with him in the Third Crusade. And you can see he kind of just dies right shortly after the Crusade starts. I can't remember. Yeah, he definitely was not massacred. Lionhearts. So, I mean, he's an adversary of the Byzantines. Not much else to really report on him. He's kind of just going to be top of D tier, maybe low C. You know, I'd say maybe low C is good. Next, we have Teutonics with Sibrand. This is actually the first founder of the Teutonic Order. Didn't really do much outside of that. You know, founded from the Siege of Acre afterwards, and started the Teutonic Knights after the Siege of Acre. So kind of cool, but mid. You know, didn't do something. Maybe just B tier for founding the Teutonics, but otherwise not much. Next, we have the Zangid leader, Izz-al-Din Mazoud. Wow, this wiki page is short. Another really... Saladin's really the head honcho, the king of the Muslim world at this time. And I'm pretty sure that some of these Muslims actually served as adversaries as well as allies. But certainly nobody in the Crusades was talking about or concerned with the Zangids at this time. Their time had kind of passed. And for that reason, he is in D tier. Who is this guy? Well, anyway, that is my Crusades leaders tier list. I'm not a historian, although I did study history. I'm sure there's a big possibility I'm completely wrong, especially about this Abbasid leader. Just didn't know enough about him. But as far as the Third Crusade goes, I feel like this is a pretty fair list. Some people may disagree with my placement of Philip as so low, but that's really how I feel. It's pretty obvious that Richard was the hero, and he did everything he could to sabotage Richard's attempts. Oh, and a previous mistake, actually, I think I got confused. I think Guy might have been Richard. Yeah, that's right. Conrad and Guy got mixed up as far as Richard was supporting Guy, Philip was supporting Conrad. So in that aspect, Philip was better at picking. Guy, that's right, Guy was the pick of Richard, and he gave him Cyprus, I think, afterwards. But still, Guy, it doesn't change the rankings, just an error from earlier. So I hope you guys like the list. Do you agree with this tier list? If not, why? I'm curious. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe below. If not, leave a dislike and tell us why this content could be improved in the comments below. We'll see you guys in the next one.